Walking down a noisy modern street, one might stumble upon a fragment of stone, a Corinthian capital, or an ancient relic resting incongruously against a glass facade. There is a sudden, jarring shift in the environment. The ephemeral present, with its neon lights and immediate concerns, is forced into a confrontation with a much older, silent reality. This encounter creates a higher coherence in history, suggesting that the ground beneath our feet is not a solid surface, but a series of buried strata. We often walk through our lives with the vanity of thinking we are fundamentally different from those who came before us. We speak of progress, of rational enlightenment, and of having outgrown the superstitions of the past. Yet the soul remains a living archaeological site. Beneath the surface of the modern individual, the same passions and tragedies that moved the Greeks are still active, structural conflicts. The noise of the present may drown them out, but it does not erase them. There is an indissoluble bond that binds the person of today to the people of antiquity, a shared inner landscape where the oldest stratum corresponds to what is now called the unconscious. The paradox of the modern condition is that we have nearly succeeded in forgetting this bond, even as we live it out every day. We pride ourselves on our distinction, our unique personality, and our moral superiority to the ancients. We look at their myths, the horror of Oedipus, the violence of the sacrificial bull, as dusty stories from a childhood the race has left behind. However, when we retreat from the outside world and look into ourselves, we do not find a unique modern interior. Instead, we find archaic traits and folk superstitions that we did not know we possessed. The dream is the myth of the individual, just as the myth is a fragment of the infantile soul life of the race. Our most private, shameful secrets are rarely ours alone. They are the common property of all ordinary elements shared by every human who has ever lived. The very thing that makes us feel most isolated, our hidden psychological distress, is actually the evidence of our brotherhood with all of mankind. We suffer not because we are broken in a new way, but because we are participating in elementary human conflicts that exist independent of time and place. This perspective was articulated with a quiet, profound intensity in the early 20th century by Jung. He worked in a world that was rapidly industrializing, a world that believed it had solved the riddle of existence through logic and technical mastery. In that era, the stakes were the loss of the human soul to the machine. Jung saw that our modern neuroses are often simply ancient myths being lived out in private, precisely because we have cut ourselves off from the collective wisdom that once managed these forces. If all world traditions were cut off in a single blow, the whole mythology and history of religion would simply start over again with the next generation. These stories are not told to us. They are hardwired into our psychic structure as secularized dreams. To ignore them is not to be free of them. It is to be possessed by them without knowing their names. The structure of the soul functions through vertical strata. The deepest levels contain the most primitive energy, a raw stream of life that is often incompatible with the demands of a socialized modern existence. We find ourselves standing between a primal warning and a forbidden desire, a tension that the ancient mind understood as the intervention of gods or demons. When we experience a psychological conflict today, we are tapping into these buried layers of human experience. The Oedipus legend is not a literary curiosity. It is a simple greatness that bridges the abyss between our age and antiquity. The horror felt by the Greeks at the realization of the incestuous bond is still a structural reality for us. We only avoid feeling it by maintaining the pretense that we are different, that we have evolved beyond such base impulses. But the soul does not evolve in the way technology does. It accumulates. It retains every previous version of itself, functioning as a repository for archaic mental products that wait for a moment of silence to re-emerge. To manage this tension between our primitive nature and our social reality, the psyche employs the symbol as a functional tool. Symbols are far more than artistic ornaments or metaphors. They are bridges designed to lead a partial amount of energy away from impossible desires and into the mental realm. Consider the transition from a purely biological urge to a cultural achievement. The discovery of fire may not have originated as a technical act of survival, but as a symbolic substitute for a repressed urge, providing a desexualized outlet for human energy. By shifting the focus to an analogy, to a fantastic correlate, the libido is taken away from its proper place and transferred to another substratum. This allows the energy to become intellectually satisfying and socially generalized. We utilize these archaic images, such as the hero's battle with a dragon or the sacrificial bull, to mediate an inner reality that we are unable to face directly. The symbol owes its origin to the tendency of a complex to dissolve into the common totality of thought, allowing the individual to carry the weight of their nature by sharing it with the collective. However, these symbolic structures create a new complication. While they protect us from being overwhelmed by our primitive instincts, they can also become a shadowy world of fantasy that conceals the very thing we need to find. The libido that we seek for our own fulfillment is often concealed and guarded by the symbols of our own resistance. We have become so adept at building these bridges that we have forgotten where they were intended to lead. We live in the mental realm, surrounded by the first fruits of our cultural transformations, yet we feel a sense of emptiness. This is the treasure difficult to attain, the raw life force that has been diverted and locked away behind the masks of our civilization. Our psychological health may depend not on creating more symbols, but on finding a way to move beyond this shadowy world into a state of direct psychological reality. We must ask whether the symbol is the permanent condition of the spirit, or if it is a temporary scaffolding that we have mistaken for the building itself. One might wonder if an objective understanding of the self is even possible within the confines of our own culture. To truly see the ground we stand on, we need a point of view outside of our own time. This is the gift of the living antiquity within the soul. By excavating the historical strata of our own unconscious, we win a stable perspective that our noisy present cannot provide. We gain an inner sympathy for the motives that drive us, recognizing that our modern struggles are the same tragedies that have always defined the human experience. The cost of our modern refusal to excavate these sites is a profound fragmentation. We dismiss the ancient mind as superstition and, in doing so, cut ourselves off from the intellectual comprehension needed to understand our own deepest motives. We remain strangers to ourselves, wondering why we are moved by passions we cannot name and haunted by dreams we cannot explain. Consider the silence of the modern soul when it is stripped of its digital noise and its illusions of progress. In that quiet, what ancient myth is currently being lived out in the theatre of your private life? If our most shameful secrets are indeed the common property of all, what is the nature of the fear that keeps them hidden? Is it possible that the treasure we are searching for is not ahead of us in the future, but buried directly beneath the floor of our current consciousness, guarded by the very images we use to define ourselves? The weight of these questions remains. We are left standing in the middle of a modern street, looking at an ancient relic, wondering which of the two is more real. The bridge has been built, the symbols have been coined, and the ancient strata remain active. The excavation is not a matter of looking back at history, but of looking down into the present.